Israel strikes deep into Iran using over half of the Air Force's total jets. What did Israel strike? What is the significance of it all? I'll have details and commentary coming up on In Focus. Between Friday night and Saturday morning, Israel carried out 3 waves of attacks against Iran that took 3 hours in total. And the question is, what was hit? First of all, I want to say, for the record, I'm very, very happy that I didn't have to give the commentary on Saturday night, that is yesterday, because initially the reports were very frustrating. It said that Israel attacked anti-aircraft batteries and it attacked some other things that all indicated or showed or demonstrated Israel's tactical brilliance, but that the strike itself was going to have no strategic impact on the nature of the contest between the Iranian regime, which seeks to annihilate Israel, and Israel, which is not interested in being annihilated. So initially, there was a sense that the main beneficiary of Israel's strike was actually the United States and Ukraine, because Israel took out a drone factory which supplies Russia. So that there was a sense that the United States pinned Israel down, said we're not allowed to attack the nuclear facilities, we're not allowed to attack the oil platforms, we're not allowed to attack strategic sites important for the maintenance of power of the Iranian regime. And by complying, Israel essentially just wasted a bunch of ammunition and did a sound and light show, and it wasn't going to have any strategic implications. And of course, the Iranian reports that were saying, oh, yawn, what did Israel do? No big deal, seemed to lend credence to the sense that Israel had gone all the way to Tehran and hadn't actually exacted any significant damage or strategic damage to Iran. And this after they wantonly attacked Israel with 200 ballistic missiles and attacked strategic sites and civilian population centers in Israel, which Israel at great cost intercepted 85% of, but 30 of which got in and did, in fact, exact considerable damage on Israeli sites, so that and installations, so that there was a sense that, you know, the United States just pinned us down again. They have us in a vice, and this was all we were able to do. So that was a sense Saturday evening, Saturday night, as the reports started coming in after Shabbat, or people like me started getting all the reports after Shabbat of what happened. But then as the hours passed and as I was looking more and more into what was attacked, and also reports, satellite imagery started coming out about the attacks, it appears that Israel did something that is very complex and sophisticated, and actually is not limited to tactical achievements, but actually has strategic implications that are significant. And the nature of the Israeli attack, the sites that Israel attacked, and how Israel was able to get beyond the limitations that the Biden administration placed on Israel is very interesting. And it tells us a lot about how Israel is maneuvering today with the Biden administration in the incredibly hostile international environment, and what Israel's strategic outlook actually is in continuing the pursuit of this war now in its second year. So, first of all, we should remember that Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, just made another unfriendly visit to Israel early last week, where he sat with Netanyahu for 2 hours, and then he sat separately with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and the IDF top leadership. And then directly from Israel, he flew to Qatar. And Qatar, of course, is Iran's closest Arab ally. And as the reports came out after the attack, it said that there were some indications that Israel had actually informed Iran that it was going to be attacking, and more or less what it was going to be attacking. Israel denied those reports. What I think is very apparent is that Iran was given prior information about Israel's intent to attack it by Secretary of State Blinken through the Qataris, who are the administration's best friends and the Iranians' best friends. So that's apparently what the line of communication was. He met with Gallant, and the top leadership of the IDF, flies on to Qatar, meets with the Qatari leadership, and then Israel strikes. So there's an obvious chain of communications here, and the conduit for it all moving is Anthony Blinken. After he came in, read Israel the Riot Act, said, you better not attack anything that we've laid out that will have strategic implications for Iran. So let's just look a second at what Israel actually did. Okay, so Israel, as everybody knows, I think, or anyway, people who have been reading the reports know, Israel knocked out, I think, 4 out of 5 of Iran's major anti-aircraft installations. Those are Russian-made S-300 anti-aircraft batteries and surface-to-air missile systems, and they were all destroyed. 4 out of 5, maybe 5 out of 5, there are some conflicting reports whether Israel took out all of Iran's anti-aircraft capabilities or just the vast majority of them. At any rate, as a result of that assault, Iran now stands basically naked before the Israeli Air Force and anybody else who might want to come in and attack Iran's nuclear installations, its oil facilities, and regime targets, et cetera, because the anti-aircraft batteries that were protecting these sites no longer exist. So that's the first thing that we have to recognize is that Israel took out Iran's ability to defend against further missile strikes by Israel. So for instance, in Beirut, when Israel attacks the Dakhia quarters, like when Israel killed Hassan Nasrallah in his bunker, so we don't have the capacity, or until Friday night, Saturday morning, we didn't have the capacity to do that in Iran because we're actually flying over Beirut and are able to strike it with these JDAMs that have a very short range. So the missiles that Israel was using to attack are medium range ballistic missiles that are capable of attacking at, over 500, 600 kilometers and beyond. We were operating 1,600 to 2,000 kilometers from Israel. So 1,000 miles to 1,400 miles away from Israel. So that's a long way for a local military like Israel. We also exposed that we have refueler capabilities of the Boeing 707s that Israel were able to adapt and transform into aerial refuelers. And so Israel is actually, we had exercises proving our mid-air refueling capabilities for our F-35s and our F-15s and F-16s back in August, and I think also in April. And then on the night of October 25th, Israel proved that those demonstrations are, in fact, a real capability, despite the fact that the United States has long barred Israel from purchasing American refuelers. Israel developed its own, and it used them very, very effectively in the strike. So we have these mid-air refuelers. We use them. We knocked out their anti-aircraft facilities. And beyond that, as I said, we also knocked out drone factories. So this is bad for Hezbollah, which is attacking Israel with drones. It's bad for the Houthis that are attacking Israel. It's bad for the Iranian proxies in Iraq that are attacking Israel. And, of course, it's bad for Russia and good for the United States and Ukraine and NATO. So Israel attacked the drone facilities. It destroyed, and then here we're starting to get into more interesting things. It destroyed, let me just go back. There's been a question, why is it that it took Israel this long? So part of it was weather, part of it was America, but there's another aspect of it that we now see as much more operational. Iran attacked Israel with 200 ballistic missiles on October 1st. It also attacked Israel in April with both ballistic and cruise missiles as well as drones. So Israel was able to use the time both after the first strike and then since the second strike to analyze the missiles. Some of them didn't explode, they just fell, and some of them exploded, but Israel was able to go back and, I wouldn't say reverse engineer, Israel is not building Iranian missiles, but able to understand the production sequence of these missiles. And from that, Israel was able to see that Iran is producing domestically they're solid fuel propellant. Solid fuel propellant is what you need in order to get these ballistic missiles that Iran produces at home to move quickly, and so at ultrasonic speed to Israel, so that from launch to landing in Israel, it could be 12 minutes or 15 minutes as opposed to, say, hours, right? And so if you take out their solid fuel propellant capabilities, then you're knocking out their ability to effectively produce these ballistic missiles, and that's a big deal. And it works out that these solid fuel propellant machines that Iran operates in two places that were attacked that I know of on Saturday night, one outside or one in Tehran, in the heart of Tehran, and here's a picture of that, and the other one in Parchin, that these are components for building, or these are the machines for building the solid fuel propellant that are made in China, that are imported from China to Iran. And the assessments that I've read since last night indicate that it's going to take Iran a minimum of several months and up to a year to replace them. So for the next several months to a year, Iran will not be able to reinstate its capacity to build the effective surface-to-surface ballistic missiles that it was shooting at Israel in April, and then again on October 1st, because it no longer has this component that's a key component of the production process that enables it to shoot these ballistic missiles at Israel. So this is very important. The other thing is that we shot at their missile launchers. Apparently, we shot at their ballistic missile launchers, so that also diminishes their capacity to attack Israel, obviously. But a word about Parchin. So from the satellite images that have come out, it's shown that most of the damage, and here I'll just show you, was done at the Parchin military complex. Now, Parchin is an interesting site. It's an interesting site because it was exposed, I think, in 2003, 2004 as an illicit undeclared nuclear site. And it's not the only one. There are other sites that Israel has exposed, that the Mujahideen al-Khalq, an Iranian opposition group, had exposed in Qom, in Fordow, Parchin, among others that were not declared by Iran, and yet they are serving their key components of Iran's nuclear weapons program. So one of the aspects of the 2015 nuclear deal that President Obama concluded with the Iranians was that what John Kerry, then Secretary of State, and Obama referred to as, what do they call, like, unprecedentedly tough inspection regime that Iran agreed to accept in the framework of implementing this deal. So they said that they were willing, that Iran had accepted unprecedentedly tough inspection regime for its nuclear sites under the nuclear deal of 2015. This was not to put it to put it delicately, this was a total lie. Why was it a lie? For two reasons. One is these were declared nuclear sites. The other one was that they were not military sites. Iran could just arbitrarily, or not at all arbitrarily, deny access to UN weapons inspectors or nuclear inspectors to their nuclear sites by proclaiming them military sites. Because the JCPOA, that's the formal name for the nuclear deal, it said that if Iran determines or claims or declares any site that the UN inspectors wish to visit a military site, those sites become off limit to the UN inspectors. So this is like, it was one of those things where the only way that the claim that they had this tough inspection regime applied to Iran as a result of the 2015 deal, the only way that that could be accepted in any way is for the media to just lie about the contents of the nuclear deal, which of course they did. And so that's why it was able to pass muster, even though it's on its face completely absurd. But that was the point, that Iran was able to declare sites like Parchin military sites and then block UN investigators from inspectors from coming in. Now, the UN inspectors did come into Parchin twice in 2004, so before the JCPOA, and in 2015. And in 2015, they discovered traces of uranium that was undeclared, that wasn't supposed to be there, that indicated that they were carrying out nuclear testing of nuclear detonators at the site at Parchin. Okay, so this was something that was exposed by UN weapons inspectors or nuclear inspectors in 2015, and then Iran went to great lengths to try to hide what was in Parchin, and Parchin was attacked. Just if you look at this graphic, in 5 different places, and the site at the bottom right, I think, of the thing that you see in yellow, is of particular interest. So the first 4 dots or places that were attacked by Israel on Friday night, Saturday morning were part of the production line of the solid fuel propellant for the ballistic missiles. But the 5th point here, it's called Talagan. Talagan 2 is the site that was exposed already both back in 2004, when Parchin was first exposed, in 2015, again, when the UN inspectors entered the site, and then when Netanyahu exposed Iran's nuclear arsenal in 2018, I think it was at the end of 2018, that we discovered that this site, there were 2 sites actually. One is Talagan 1 and the other one is Talagan 2. Talagan 2 that was attacked in the Israeli strike was identified as a place where Iran was carrying out nuclear explosive tests. Okay, so this is a nuclear site that was attacked. It wasn't declared. It wasn't supposed to be there. Iran scrubbed allegedly the Parchin site. So the fact that this was attacked means that it puts the United States in a problematic position. The United States said to Israel, you can't attack Iran's nuclear sites. Fine, but that's the declared nuclear sites. That's the sites that everybody's looking at, the sites that everybody has seen that are identified as nuclear sites that everybody is watching. That's Bushehr, that's Isfahan, etc. But there are other places, even now, Fordow, Qom, because we know about them. But there are lots of sites in Iran that aren't declared. And then what? And this brings me to sort of the sophistication of Israel's operation in Iran and, in general, its strategic concept in prosecuting this war. So the United States, how do I put it? The United States gave Israel directives, and the directive said, basically, Israel, you're allowed to counterstrike against Iran, but you're not allowed to target any sites that have strategic significance for the regime. So that's nuclear, that's economic, oil, and that's regime-aligned things. So they tried to murder Prime Minister Netanyahu. Of course, Biden, Kamala Harris have never condemned that, which is stunning. Blinken paid lip service to it finally, right after 4 days when he was sitting with Netanyahu himself. That was really nice of him. But the administration has made a point, or at least the president and the vice president, of saying nothing about the attempted assassination of the prime minister when you actually had a missile penetrate his house. Just, they actually attacked his house. So you're not allowed to go and do that to Khamenei. You can't attack Khamenei's house or anything else that's identified as a regime target, like the house of the dictator of Iran. Okay, so the United States made these guidelines, and the reason why the United States did it is because, as we see in Lebanon, as we've seen for over a year in Gaza, the United States doesn't want Israel to win this war. It wants Israel to prosecute this war to a stalemate, which maintains Hamas in power in Gaza, Hezbollah in power in Lebanon. You have Amos Hochstein in Lebanon, scurrying around, meeting with all these people, meeting with French in Paris, doing all of this diplomacy to try to get the Lebanese to agree to a diplomatic deal that will essentially leave Hezbollah in its dominant position in Lebanon. So the United States does not want Israel to rearrange the chessboard strategically by annihilating Iran's nuclear capabilities, by helping the Iranian people to oust the regime from power, by asserting Israeli security control in the long term over Gaza, or a security zone in South Lebanon to protect the citizens of northern Israel from the kind of attack that we suffered on October 7th, but tenfold coming in from Lebanon. The United States doesn't want any of that. They want to get back to the status quo that existed on October 6th, where Israel is constantly on the defensive, and the side that is initiating strategic moves in the region and around Israel's border is Iran, both directly and through its proxies. That's what the United States wants. Now, why does it want it? It wants it because the Democrats don't view Iran as an enemy to the United States, and they view Israel as a nuisance to the U.S.'s strategy that the Democrats had, adopted under Obama and maintain it now through Biden-Harris, of realigning the United States in the Middle East away from Israel and the Sunnis and towards Iran, because they think that Iran can balance Israeli power, can balance Sunni power, and Iran is a force for stability in the Middle East, and Israel is a force for instability in the Middle East because, Jews. And so what you need to do is block Israel from achieving any sort of strategic advances that expand its regional power and security, and you protect Iran and its so-called equities, that is Hezbollah, Syrian President Bashar Assad, Hamas, the Iraqi militias that are controlled by Tehran, the Houthi regime in Yemen. All of these are Iranian equities that are not allowed to be touched by Israel or degraded in any way that makes them strategically insignificant. They have to be maintained. And so you saw all along the way over the past year that the Biden-Harris administration has harshly opposed all Israeli assaults that had strategic significance for the enemy. And so that, of course, the most obvious one was Rafah, that they didn't want Israel. They instituted a partial arms embargo to prevent Israel, then to punish Israel for going into the city of Rafah and taking over Rafah and taking over the international border with Egypt, which blocks Hamas from rebuilding its strength, right? So by going into Rafah, Israel was able to free some hostages. It was able to kill Sinwar. It's able to cut off Hamas's supply line from Egypt. It's able to prevent Hamas terrorists from traversing the international border, getting through into Gaza, out of Gaza. And so this is a strategic juggernaut that Israel must control if it wants to win the war. And then here you saw that the Biden administration was completely opposed to that move. You see it in South Lebanon, where they were trying to, we've exposed here, I just want to show you here, look at some of the weapons that we found in Lebanon. Look at the tunnel complexes that they have. Here's this tunnel complex was capable of holding 1,000 fighters all poised to enter Israel, which is just like minutes from the border. Okay, look at this one. You see this, and look at these weapons that Israel found. So the United States was telling Israel for months that we're not allowed to go into South Lebanon, that what we have to do is accept a diplomatic agreement that would end the war with Hezbollah still in control of southern Lebanon, with its forces still able to either enter or remain in South Lebanon as a matter of course, and that Israel, to get to some sort of interruption of the daily rocket and missile assaults from Lebanon into Israel, all of which is, by the way, a war crime. But whatever, Israel was supposed to give Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon territorial concessions in the Golan Heights, in Mount Dov, in Nahariya, and in other places. So that was the U.S. position. Leave all of these weapons, leave all of these tunnels, leave all of these forces, these genocidal forces poised at your border intact, and accept a ceasefire. Right? That was the American goal. So protecting Hezbollah, which they're still doing now with Hochstein, protect Hamas, and obviously protect Iran. That's the American strategic concept, and obviously it undermines Israel. So what did Israel do here in Iran? So the Parchin story tells us that Israel did on Friday night, Saturday morning, something similar to what it did when it took out Nasrallah, when it took out Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, and even when it took out Yahya Sinwar in Rafah. So Nasrallah, he is a mass murderer, not only of Israelis, but of Americans. And obviously, we're talking about the 241 Marines that were killed in the barracks bombing in 1983. We're talking about thousands of American GIs who were killed by Hezbollah-aligned, Hezbollah-controlled forces in Iraq during the war in Iraq, and on and on. So Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, terror master Hassan Nasrallah, is a target for the United States, not only for Israel. The Americans opposed Israel going after Nasrallah because they support Hezbollah effectively. That's their diplomatic position regarding Lebanon and maintaining a status quo in that country that has Hezbollah essentially in control of everything there. So by going after Nasrallah, Israel went against the interests of the administration, but it advanced American national security interests. It went after an American enemy and put the United States under the Biden-Harris administration in an uncomfortable position where they couldn't criticize Israel for doing something that was strategically significant from the perspective of defeating Iran and its terror axis, because Israel went after an American enemy and killed him. The same thing, of course, was true with Ismail Haniyeh in Iran and Yahya Sinwar in Gaza. And so in all of these cases, what Israel did was it located strategically significant targets that the Biden-Harris administration absolutely opposed its attacking, but couldn't publicly oppose it or punish Israel for carrying out these operations because his people were American enemies as well. It's an indefensible position, and as a result, there's no way to punish Israel or take action against Israel for doing something like this. And it's the same sort of concept with Parchin and the undeclared nuclear sites in Iran. Well, if they're undeclared, then they can't be protected. And if they're undeclared and Israel attacks them, then the United States shouldn't mind because, first of all, they're nuclear sites and the United States shouldn't mind that. Of course, they already said that they oppose Israel attacking nuclear sites, so you could say, well, they made that clear. But if it's undeclared, then they have a problem attacking Israel for attacking sites that are, by the way, like in Parchin, they're dual use. You have the nuclear you have the nuclear triggers apparently that they were using for military testing of their nuclear triggers, and you have the solid fuel propellant factories. So you have these two things going on there. You can attack the nuclear while you're attacking the other one. That's a strategically significant attack. And obviously there are things that were attacked that we still don't know about, we may not know about, that I would argue are probably equally, if not more strategically significant. So so what is the outcome then? So first of all, by taking out the anti-aircraft stuff, Israel was setting up the situation vis-a-vis Iran to be in a position to actually take down targets that are very strategically significant if Iran retaliates against Israel. So that's one thing. If Iran retaliates against Israel, they are now, undefended. They don't have anti-aircraft batteries anymore. So Israel can go in and act in Tehran and in Parchin and in Qom and anywhere else the same way that they operate over Gaza or over Beirut. Okay, so that's one thing. And then there's another thing, which is that in 9 days, it'll be November 5th, and that's the U.S. election. And you may see a change in the administration. And obviously, if Kamala Harris is elected, she's made it very clear that she's going to maintain the same policy that she's had along with Joe Biden for the past 4 years. And if Trump comes in, what was his seeming criticism of Israel? His criticism of Israel all along was that Israel has to finish faster, that Israel has to get this done faster. But Israel can't because the Biden administration is blocking us from achieving strategic victory. So it's like we keep going up to the line, whether in Gaza or in South Lebanon, and we can't cross it because if we cross it, then we'll cross the United States. And the Biden administration has made pretty clear that they intend to really screw Israel beginning on November 6th. I mean, they put it out to the media. They've said it all but openly that after November 5th, they're going to, they may very likely allow the UN Security Council to put out a ceasefire resolution that, blames Israel for the continuation of the war. They may recognize the state of Palestine. And what we saw, and I've tweeted about it over the past couple of days. So the International Criminal Court, I talked about Karim Khan and how he's being accused credibly, actually, by one of his employees of protracted sexual harassment, both verbal and physical harassment of this poor woman who was working for him. And this came to light in April, and then whistleblowers' his complaint was made on May 4th, I think. And since we last met, more information has come out, including the fact that ICC investigators went to talk to this woman, where not at her office, not, at a cafe. No, they went to her house and began asking her intimate details of how Karim Khan sexually harassed her in front of her small child. And lo and behold, she decided that she wasn't going to file a complaint with these mafia thugs, right, who pretend to be, investigators for the ICC to really find out what happened to it, and in the end say, nice kid you got there. You want me to mess with his brain a little bit? Why don't we talk about, what he did to you in a hotel room when he forced his way into your hotel room in the middle of the night and wouldn't leave? What happened then? Why don't you tell us in front of your young child, right? Oh, no, he can stay, right? So that, she decided that she wasn't going to give a complaint. That was actually, the AP did that. But in the meantime, while this is all coming to a head with Karim Khan, the 3 ICC, International Criminal Court judges, were supposed to sit and deliberate on Karim Khan's request that they issue international arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Gallant, right? And what happened? Oh, well, over the weekend, it was suddenly reported that the one judge who isn't considered completely anti-Israel, there are 3 judges, one judge from Romania, this woman, was considered to be somewhat fair, whatever that means. She reportedly asked, probably the same way that this victim asked not to file a complaint, she asked to be removed for health reasons from the panel. And she was replaced by a Slovenian judge. Now, we don't know much about Slovenia here in Israel. We don't care much about Slovenia in Israel. But it works out that this left-wing Slovenian government decided that the way that they were going to make a name for themselves was by being the most anti-Israel government in the European Union, which is pretty hard, but they're doing a pretty good job. So Slovenia over the past year recognized Palestine in June. They joined South Africa's complaint against Israel before the International Court of Justice, accusing us of genocide. And so now a Slovenian judge who is probably just as anti-Israel as a French judge on the panel, for instance, is replacing the Romanian judge. So I guess they wanted to get a unanimous ruling against Netanyahu and Gallant. So this is, this could happen this week. It could happen after the elections. It can happen whenever, but it's right here. That's it. You have 3 totally hostile judges working for a completely hostile criminal court, but criminal as in the court itself is criminal, right? As we see with their treatment of this poor woman, right? And they want to put out arrest warrants against our prime minister and our defense minister for carrying out the most just war for Israel's national survival that, humanity can possibly point to. So that's what we're dealing with. And the United States under the Biden-Harris administration has done nothing at all to curb this abuse of power by the International Criminal Court. I mean, and here I think it's very important to point out, I was on the Mark Levin show talking about this last week, and I'm just going to repeat what I said to Mark, which is that President Trump put out an executive order when he was president that announced that if the ICC took action against either U.S. servicemen or U.S. personnel or personnel belonging to American allies, including Israel, that the United States was going to impose a bunch of sanctions on ICC personnel, all of them, right, including barring them from entering the United States, among other things. And when Biden came into office, he canceled the executive order. When the ICC started making its moves to issue arrest warrants against Israeli leaders and to go against Israel in a number of other ways on the basis of just Hamas-based complaints that were then submitted by the Palestinian Authority to the ICC, Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, basically took Trump's executive order and he introduced it to the Senate as a bill. And it was also introduced separately by Elise Stefanik, Chip Roy, and a couple of other members of the House of Representatives as a House bill. Okay, the House passed it with the Republican majority. Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer have blocked the Cotton bill because they still have, it's a 50-50 tie in the Senate, and Kamala Harris controls it with her 51st vote for the Democrats. So she and Schumer have blocked all discussion of the Cotton bill in the Senate. So they've blocked it from moving forward at the behest of the Biden administration. The White House, I think in the spring already, has said that they would veto the bill if it came before the president. So the United States, under the Biden-Harris administration, is actually actively protecting the International Criminal Court. And we can expect that just along with the UN Security Council resolution condemning Israel, the recognition perhaps of the state of Palestine, we can expect for the administration to green light the issuance of arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu, against Gallant by the ICC, either even before November 5th, but certainly after November 5th going forward, as part of this attacking Israel, isolating Israel, making Israel even more dependent on the United States as the United States effectively kicks us in the face over and over and over again. So we go back, when we look at the United States more generally, what do we see? We say that nobody really wants to be in the Middle East, right? I mean, it's not the Democrats, not the Republicans. Nobody wants to send more forces into the Middle East. And so the likelihood of the United States sending forces to the Middle East to take out Iran's nuclear installations is very small. I mean, I don't think it exists, but certainly it's very small. The idea that would happen, might happen if, as Hillary Clinton said, if Iran, she said it before the Pennsylvania primaries in 2008, and I thought it was like the worst thing I ever heard. She said, if Iran attacks Iran, if Iran nukes Israel, we're nuking Iran. And I looked at this and I said, what did you just say? You just said that you won't do anything against Iran's nuclear installations until after they attack Israel. And so that, I think, remains the operating concept for most Americans on both sides. They don't want to go to war against Iran, which is, okay, whatever, shirking responsibilities. This is a primary threat to the United States in the Middle East. Even Kamala said that. But, okay, just take that as a given. But you still see two varying attitudes. The Democrats want to protect Iran from Israel, and the GOP wants to, their policy, whether it's Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell or Trump or Cotton or Cruz or any number of, pick one, right? Their concept is to give Israel or J.D. Vance the means to conduct the strikes itself. So the United States doesn't want to do it. Let's help Israel win. So then that goes back to the question that Trump said, why is it taking so long? So it's taking long to win this war because the Biden administration is blocking Israel from achieving the war goals of totally eliminating, this strategic chessboard where Iran gets to initiate and Israel can only defend itself from initiated aggression by Iran, either direct aggression from Iran or through its manifold proxies. So Israel keeps walking up to the line and not crossing it, because if we cross it, we cross the Democrats. So, that's basically, where we are. And when we look at my initial sort of frustrated response when I started hearing what was attacked in Iran, you can understand the growing frustration or the constant frustration of Israelis, because Netanyahu, the prime minister who has gotten us this far, he actually isn't free to discuss the strategic design of the war plan, because if he does, he gets in trouble with the Americans. What basically would enable Israel to win a strategic victory in this war? So one, knock out Iran's nuclear capabilities, two, give the Iranian people the confidence to actually overthrow the regime by weakening it, to going after Revolutionary Guard Corps bases or whatever the key facilities are. I certainly don't know what they are, but key regime facilities, taking them out, making them look more vulnerable, making them indeed more vulnerable to empower the Iranian people, 85%, 90% of whom want to overthrow the regime, give them the opportunity to do so. So that's Iran. In Lebanon, and in Lebanon, we have to reimpose a security zone there in southern Lebanon, because, what we're looking at now is a situation where, we've lost so many soldiers over the past week going in hand-to-hand fights with Hezbollah, where the Hezbollah start throwing grenades at them from a tunnel, or jumping out of holes in the ground or whatever, or from second stories of buildings that Israeli forces are entering to try to wipe them out. They're hiding in these forested areas that Israel, by any military concept, would involve burning up all of these forests so that they don't have that ability to hide. But Israel can't do that because the international community would go apeshit and, would attack Israel, would condemn Israel, et cetera, if Israel dared to do something like this. So, we have all of these things. And the only way to really push Hezbollah forces far enough away from the border to protect northern Israel and to allow life to go back to normal and safely in northern Israel is for the IDF to be, in charge of South Lebanon the way that we were until May of 2000, when we pulled out of the security zone because Barak was the prime minister and he's a strategic idiot. So we pulled out, and then Hezbollah took over, and we got, these tunnels that 1,000 people can mass in, a minute from the border with Israel, with all of their weapons, all of their gear. We have, this incredible situation where schools, civilian homes, UNIFIL posts, all of them are used as cover for Hezbollah launching operations against Israel. And Israel isn't supposed to do anything because we removed ourselves south of the international border. We have to move ourselves north of the international border and stop with this nonsense that UN forces from Turkey and Indonesia and France are going to protect Israel from Hezbollah. It's not going to happen. In Gaza, obviously we have to have permanent control over the international border with Egypt, between Gaza and Egypt. But in order to have that, you also have to have control of Rafah. You can't just have a narrow slip. So we need strategic control over all of Gaza. We need to have a military government in Gaza that is the only way to block Hamas from rebuilding its power, because they control the area politically and educationally and socially, et cetera. Israel has to be in charge. There's no alternative to Israel. But we can't even discuss these things with the Biden-Harris administration, because if we do, they will put a total embargo on arms to Israel. They'll go after Israel in the UN. So, all of these things, it's like we're taking these operations to the limit of what we can without exposing a strategic goal that would actually change things for the better in the long term for Israel, by undermining the ability of Iran and its proxies to rebuild their power and to annihilate Israel. And so you can't even say that. And so, the people of Israel go from jubilation and euphoria with things like the beepers to disappointment, frustration with the initial reports of the attacks in Iran, or the incredible combat losses that we're suffering from our reservists and from our regular forces operating in Lebanon and continuing to operate in Gaza. And it's very hard to see where all of this is leading to. And finally, we're looking at it and saying, well, why is it that Herzi Halevi, the chief of staff of the IDF, who opposes any permanent Israeli presence in Gaza, who totally opposes and will not allow the IDF to operate in a way that will enable us to actually establish a security zone in South Lebanon. And he's very strongly in the October 6th mindset, along with Ronen Bar, the head of Shabak. Why can't they be fired? Why can't Yoav Gallant, who is protecting them, enabling them, and has been acting as the opposition to the prime minister inside of the government and the advocate for America's stringent limitations on Israel from within the government. Why hasn't he been fired? All of these things are related to how Israel's limited options going forward, with the Biden-Harris administration. So it on the one hand, it puts us in a certain position if Harris gets elected. On the other hand, it puts us on a precipice of another position if Trump gets elected. And here I just want to say something else, which is just sort of the way to end it, I guess. I just finished this fantastic book that I came upon basically by chance called The Splendid and the Vile, I think, by Eric Larson. And it's sort of an intimate portrait of Winston Churchill and his inner circle during the German assault on Britain, beginning with the fall of France in May 1940, through basically Operation Barbarossa when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, and the American entrance into the war after the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Because for those months, a year or so, Britain was completely alone. And Winston Churchill, really by the strength of his own character and cosmic, leadership capabilities, he was able to keep the British together for that whole time. And, we don't even know. We hear about the Blitz. We hear about the bombing of England and all the rest of it in school. But the dimensions of what the British people absorbed is not so well known. At least I consider myself fairly educated, and I didn't realize that 30,000 British were murdered in these nightly mass murdering bombing raids that the Luftwaffe carried out over the skies of England, beginning in, I think it was actually in June of 1940. So 5,600 of them were children. So 30,000 people are murdered just in their beds, in shelters. You had shelters annihilated, 75 people killed here. You had, hundreds of people killed in a night in cities not in London primarily, but all over England. And these losses were just devastating. And for the first several months, you had this stiff upper lip. You had Winston Churchill rallying the people time after time, but it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to do so as the damage got worse and worse and worse, as the casualties got larger and larger and larger in the winter, in the horrible winter of 1941, and into the spring, which that began very slowly. There's just this sense that this is never going to end. And people started to despair. And Franklin Roosevelt got reelected in November 1940, so he was able to finally do more stuff for the British than he could when he was being attacked by the isolationists. And he got Lend-Lease, which was important. But Winston Churchill constantly had this idea, towards the end, as it was described in this book, and known. I mean, I didn't learn that, at least for the first time in reading, but that Winston Churchill his whole game was to wait it out, survive until the United States got into the war. And that the minute that the Americans got into the war, they would essentially save Britain. And that was true. That was true. The Japanese attacked in Pearl Harbor December 7th. The Germans declared war on the United States December 10th. And by Christmas of December 1941, Winston Churchill was living in the White House with FDR and coordinating war planning with the United States. So that happened, right? It eventually happened. And in Israel's case, we're shouldering this incredible burden. The fight that we're fighting is no less the fight of the Western world than the British fight against Nazi Germany from the fall of France until the U.S. came in after Pearl Harbor. It's the same. All of the shipping in the Red Sea that's being attacked by the Houthis, they're not just attacking Israel. They're attacking the world order. Iran says that it wants to attack Israel, but it also says that it wants to annihilate the United States, and they mean it. They're not just threatening Israel. They're threatening Europe with their Shihab ballistic missiles, their intermediate range ballistic missiles, they don't need them to attack Israel. That's overkill. They need them to attack Europe. And you have their terrorists operating all over the world, in Latin America, in the United States, throughout Europe, throughout the Arab world, throughout Africa. And here is Israel, this tiny country with 9 million people, right? 7+ million of whom are Jews, right? We're fighting it on our own. We're fighting it on our own with no expectation that the United States is going to come in and fight with us. The United States, we're not the Brits, we're Jews. No expectation that the United States is going to come in and join us. But, a hope that the United States will stop undermining our war effort, will stop enabling people like Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer in Britain to impose arms embargoes against Israel and to block the UN from passing anti-Israel Security Council resolutions and stop the International Criminal Court from issuing arrest warrants against our prime minister and our defense minister and, on, and to block the International Court of Justice at The Hague from accusing us of committing genocide. There is a sort of expectation, right, that, okay, the 82nd Airborne or Delta Force or whomever, they're not going to come in. You're not going to use B-2 bombers against the nuclear installations in Iran. That's on Israel. That's on our men and women. Fine, bring it on. But why do you have to side with Iran? Why do you have to protect Iran from our forces? And like throughout this book that I was reading, and I was really like riveted by it. It says I've been reading some really good books over the past year and that keep me riveted. Here it was sort of part of it. Sometime I had to put it down because it just was too close to home. But an undying source of frustration here was, Winston Churchill was a magnificent leader. Magnificent. But when he left office, even though they ousted him shortly after the war, he was revered by the British people. They might not have liked his economic policies. Who knows? They might have been broken by the end of the war. And they couldn't stand listening to him anymore because he reminded them too much of everything that they had sacrificed. Who knows? They did oust him. They brought in Clement Attlee. But he was revered. And internationally, I mean, he's a superstar in the United States forever, right? And in Israel, we have this leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is, I think, of Churchill's stature. His leadership in this war has certainly been Churchillian. It is his finest hour. But whereas Churchill was lionized, Netanyahu is criminalized. Whereas the British, the RAF was seen as just the tigers of the world and everybody loved them and revered them, the British pilots for protecting Britain and for launching these raids in Berlin, and our men and women are reviled. We're being accused of war crimes for protecting our country and for protecting humanity from the scourge of Iran and its terror proxies. And, you see us carrying out this operation in Iran, and in order to make it strategically significant, we actually have to act in a way that is very careful and calculated to minimize the assault that the Americans can wage against us for doing these kinds of things. And so, this is just the reality. This is the nature of things with Israel. I wish it weren't, but I have to say that, like I said, I'm glad that I didn't have to give this explanation of what happened in Iran last night, because I was feeling kind of frustrated. But, if you just sit down and you go through and you see what happened, it's the same strategic concept. It's carry out strikes that diminish massively the prospect of your enemy of causing you strategic damage. So the anti-aircraft batteries, the liquid propulsion factories, et cetera, the drone factories, do things that make maximum number of people satisfied, i.e. America, Ukraine, and take your strategic gains in a way that won't provoke the ire and the condemnation and the diplomatic warfare that you can expect if you do anything too openly on your own behalf. That's the way we've been fighting since October 7th, 2023, and it's now October 27th, 2024, and we're still in this going to the edge, not crossing it. We need to win. We're getting tired. We don't have soldiers to spare in Israel, and we just have to finish this war. So that's where we are today. I think we can all be proud of what was accomplished in Iran and understand that this is obviously a demonstration of capabilities and opening up Iran to a much more strategic assault. Same is what we're facing in Lebanon, same what we're facing in Gaza. And we just have to be able to get across that finish line to win this war and enjoy the fruits of peace. So those are my thoughts, and I'll see you again later this week. Take care.